Cinema St. Louis's The Lens is now the takeup.com, a place to gather after the film is over. I'm your host, Joshua Ray, and fear not, all your favorite episodes of The Lens featuring all your favorite guests are still here in your feed, just a little refocused. Stay subscribed to us here for future episodes, and you can follow along for new ones and more at the Takeup STL. Thank you for joining us on The Lens, a Cinema St. Louis podcast. Today, I am joined by my co-host, Andrew Wyatt. Hey, Andrew.
Hello.
Kayla will be joining us a little later. First, Andrew and I are going to talk about our weekend at the 2022 True False Film Festival in Columbia, Missouri. Then after the Lens portion, where we talk about Ryusuke Hamaguchi's Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy, we're going to pick our own Oscar winners. So, Andrew, we should start the podcast by saying that I made a very big oopsie in playing with my new equipment last time. So we're recording this because you and I went to the True False Film Festival. We're recording this after we did everything else, in which I sound like I used a CB radio. I know you haven't heard it yet, but it's bad. I apologize in advance to our listeners, but Andrew reassured me this weekend it is a rite of passage for every podcast to have a poorly recorded episode. And to clarify, Andrew, you and Kayla sound wonderful. I just sound like I'm recording inside of a toilet that is also a spaceship.
It was a bit like you were talking through a kazoo.
Yeah. So you can, just enjoy this first portion and then sample the rest of it. It's not that bad. I'm kidding. I think it sounds fine. But yeah, Andrew and I spent this weekend, a long weekend in Columbia, Missouri, doing, I don't know, one of our favorite things, right? It's one of my favorite things to do every year is go to the True False Film Festival. And this year it was back in its traditional style. We both felt pretty comfortable going because they did it just like SLIF, where they required vaccination, proof of vaccination, and check-ins, and no food or drink at venues, which is, I think, the only way to do it right now. I had a really great experience this year. It's always good. Like, sometimes the average quality of the films is better from one year to the next. But I would say this year, I was really excited by a few of the things that we saw. But we got to see a few things together, one of which was a holdover from Sundance that I think might be a big deal this year. That was Fire of Love.
Yeah, that's been picked up, I guess, by Nat Geo, which means presumably it'll be appearing on Disney Plus at some point. I think all the Nat Geo stuff kind of lands there eventually now. Both it and The Territory have already been sort of snapped up post Sundance, I guess.
Yeah, there were quite a few others that I weren't aware. The Balcony movie was picked up by HBO Max, which is an odd choice for them, it seems. We'll get into it. But first, Fire of Love is about some volcanologists. Am I saying that right? Volcanologists? I think so.
It's a little bit of a volcanologist.
Volcanologists. Yeah. Right. Okay. Live long and prosper. They don't, as you learn early in the film. They expire in a volcano, but they are Katya and Maurice Kraft. The film is mostly comprised of their footage, and their footage is this mesmeric, very dangerously up close to the center of volcanoes. And of course, that is their ultimate downfall. But the film chronicles their lives mostly using this exact footage.
And this was a story I had actually heard a little bit about them. Like, I was aware of their names and their sort of daredevil approach to filming volcanoes and also their untimely end. So, and I was aware they had a relationship with the Mount St. Helens disaster and a few other particular volcanic disasters or incidents. But I hadn't really ever seen their footage before. So for me, this was I think I maybe liked this a little more than you did, because for me, it was all about sort of the science communicator aspects of it. And there's a little bit of a meta thing too, where the film gets into how they understood the importance of film and photography for science communication, and how that they themselves had filmmaker sensibilities, that they knew how to create drama and how to stage things in such a way that and frame things for maximum impact, which I thought was kind of, feels like if there was a theme in True False this year, at least in the films that I picked, that was one that kind of emerged for me, was a lot of stuff about people, subjects using film in a canny or cunning way to make their point or to communicate.
The part where they're talking about whether or not, they were completely aware of the apparatus and how to use the apparatus, and pointing out that, yes, they were very aware of that, was my favorite part. The rest, I felt there's a lot of very cute stuff going on. It's narrated. I did not fact check this, but that was definitely Miranda July narrating, right?
Yes,
okay.
It was, yeah.
Okay, great. Like one of the most recognizable voices, Miranda July, narrating it in very kind of opaque, philosophical, well, not that opaque, but definitely philosophical terms, and something that would make sense for Miranda July to do. But it was all very cute, all very
kind of
neat.
poetic. Like it's scripted in a sort of poetic love poem kind of way. Obviously, like that's the sort of the point, is that they had this, that the Crafts had this relationship that was built around their shared love of science and science communication.
But I thought all of that sort of impeded on what was most interesting, which was their footage. And just at times there are montages of lava exploding in your face, and just the physics of lava, something, we've all seen footage of it, but especially with their sort of the film grain, the film stock that they're using, it takes on these just beautiful, it doesn't even look possible.
I don't think this footage has been preserved a little better than, say, the lost Aretha Franklin concert or whatever, or the Apollo 11 footage, but it is being sort of brought back into public awareness. So if Nat Geo does nothing else, they can sort of bring this footage back out into the light, where maybe it doesn't have the same level of public consciousness about it in the last few years.
And I'll say there were two other archival documentaries I saw that one was riveting, just as compelling as Fire of Love, and had sort of some of the same issues. That's Riotsville, USA, which is comprised of all archival footage, and it addresses the United States government's response to the riots of the 1960s in Watts, Detroit, Chicago, and all across the nation. And in particular, two training grounds that they used to stage riots and then use them as training for police force, military force. And it's completely absurd to watch it. It's actually frightening to watch it, because it is so absurd how they think a riot comes to fruition, and how they think the racial divide compels people to join this in the most idiotic ways, is what they believe. But it chronicles not only that, but the riot report that was commissioned by Lyndon B. Johnson. And
it's consistent with what we know about policing. I mean, I hate to say that policing has changed, probably really hasn't, but it is consistent with, J. Edgar Hoover saying that the Black Panthers are the most dangerous force in America in the 1960s.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is exactly, it chronicles the conditions under which those ideas were made popular, and how the media and the government were able to position those ideas, even though our own government sanctioned commission pointed out in a 400-page volume that was not the case. The case is a kind of segregation of class, of culture. And the film is occasionally a little too cute about these things. It uses a lot of public access or publicly funded television, and it got quite a few laughs because it is considerably dated. But that's another film I think a lot of people will be paying attention to. I have a tie for my favorite things, which we'll get into another one of them. But the other archival footage film I wanted to talk about was Mr. Landsbergis.
Oh yeah, you
And
sat through that, huh? That's not one I was prepared for.
well, yeah. So you tell me 4 hours, and I'm like, does someone deserve 4 hours of my time? I'm sure they do, because they've made a film that's 4 hours long. It's Sergei Loznitsa, who's made State Funeral from archival
Oh, okay,
footage
okay.
last year,
Yeah.
and Donbass, and it was introduced by Devika Girish of Film Comment, and she called him the great chronicler of modern Eastern Europe. And Anne pointed out that his whereabouts are currently unknown. He was attempting to spirit away his parents, and the Washington Post last reported his whereabouts outside the border of Ukraine. He's a Ukrainian filmmaker. The film could not be timed at a more, I won't say in a good way, but it chronicles ascendancy of the independence movement in Lithuania from 1989 to 1991, and how they broke free from the USSR. And it is mostly done with archival footage. What's outside of that archival footage is President Landsbergis. And he's sort of giving context to the copious amounts of archival footage. We're seeing full Congress sessions where he's elected. We're seeing full Congress sessions where they have voted to gain their independence. And you are so inside this thing for so long. And I have very rarely felt like I was on a journey of this scale. And of course, it devolves into a complete military coup attempt in the last hour and a half. I can't really tell you time frame because I was so utterly lost in it. I think if it is released this year, I can imagine it's sort of fodder that I'll be talking about all year, including when we talk about the best of films of the year.
I did like Vedette. I don't know if you saw that one about the cow.
It didn't.
Yeah.
Is it second
I like
cow
animals,
or?
so, yeah, it's kind of a second cow. It's a very slow it's a movie about a cow in an alpine valley in Switzerland, and so take that for what it's worth. But I really enjoyed it. I tend to like films that sort of focus on animals. It's one of those sort of low key. It's not a movie about vegetarianism, but it sort of has a low vegetarian or vegan vibe because it's making you empathize and fall in love with this animal and see the feelings and the suffering that this animal has. So it doesn't like hit the point really hard. It's just putting a camera in to this barn in this sort of alpine valley. There's like in this particular valley, I guess there's some kind of tradition where cows get named. A cow in any given herd gets named a queen. Like it's not just a dominant in its social circle, it's actually like honored. They put like a laurel on it at a festival every year or something. So this particular cow, Vedette, it kind of follows her over, I think, about 3 or 4 seasons. The time is somewhat a little bit ambiguous, and just sort of looking at her routine and her relationship with her owners. And I loved it. Like I said that I saw it, like I did the Brooklyn Nine-Nine thing after I saw it. I said, I've only spent an hour and a half with Vedette, but if anything happened to her, I would kill myself and everybody in this room. Like I think is the point. They're trying to make you love and fall in love with this animal, even though she doesn't do anything particularly charming. Like she's just an animal being an animal.
Yeah.
But it does a good job of sort of convincing you of the fundamental feeling in this creature. I like The Territory a lot. Did you see that one?
I didn't.
That one's about indigenous people in Brazil. So this kind of dovetails with the one we saw a couple of years ago about like the rise of right-wing populism in Brazil.
The Edge of Democracy.
Edge of Democracy. Yes, I couldn't remember this. So this is sort of like, in some ways, it almost plays like an interesting complement to that because it's showing sort of the fallout for Native and indigenous people. There no government sort of cracked down and gave some political and social cover for settlers to encroach allegedly protected Native lands. So the film is sort of focused on one guy. I mean, he's just a kid. He's like 18 years old in the film, who becomes the sort of de facto leader or chieftain, or at least the outwardly facing representative, the state, the figurehead for his little group of like 250 people, the last 250 people in this indigenous group. But he's also sort of obliged to become sort of a war chief in that role, because they're in conflict with the settlers around them who are encroaching illegally into their land, onto their territories, and trying to settle there permanently. But so it's an interesting social issue doc just from that perspective. It's a cool story. It's told primarily from the perspective of the indigenous people and an environmental activist who comes in to support them. But it's also very much a film about filmmaking, because this kid pretty quickly dials into how important images and footage are, both from a legal perspective in terms of documenting the presence of illegal settlements on their land, in their rainforest, because the government essentially doesn't believe them when they claim this. They said, well, we got to have proof, we got to have documentation of this, but also for putting the issues that his people are facing, for putting those issues out there into the public consciousness, for getting media attention on what's happening to them and how valuable that can be. And again, I think Nat Geo has also snapped up that one, so I'm anticipating it'll be showing up on Disney Plus at some point this year.
My other favorite film has not been snapped up by anyone, as far as I can see. It was called Gods of Mexico.
Oh yeah, I heard some things about this one.
It has a unique structure. The first act is all southern rural Mexico. This is also all indigenous people. The titular gods of Mexico is actually just the indigenous people who live in Mexico, and they are salt mining. The second chapter is all portraiture of the people in their spaces throughout all of Mexico, and this portion is all in this most glorious black and white. That sometimes maybe for some it might verge on kind of, it's so beautiful, it's fashion photography. And I think that's kind of the point, is to beautify these people in their natural landscapes and places. And the third portion is another sort of semi-fictionalized lime mining expedition. And the quote unquote fictional sections would remind you of just the most awe-inspiring filmmaking there's ever been. You and I both really loved This Is Not a Burial, It's a Resurrection.
Yeah.
The fiction parts of that would recall that film to you. And maybe even, I don't know, the first 5 minutes of There Will Be Blood, or the Dawn of Man sequence.
So a little Kubrickian.
Kubrickian, Tarkovsky, maybe Carlos Regadas in there too, but it is just a widescreen frame that is used to capture the land and its people in the most awe-inspiring techniques. And because of these sort of the way it's fictionalized, you do think about filmmaking and the apparatus of it too.
We were just saying, we were talking pre-show that you didn't get to see Dos Estaciones, which I think is
I did not, no.
I wouldn't pretend to know what the translation of that is, so I'm just going to use the Spanish language title. That's another one that is very deliberately, it falls into that docufiction band, and it also has some really amazing imagery in it, but I'm still sort of parsing out how I feel about it, because it's one of those things where I almost want the more straight documentary version of it. I'm not sure that the docufiction aspects of it really worked for me. So to back up, this is the story of a tequila factory in Mexico, one of the sort of the last privately owned, locally owned tequila factories, and owned by a woman who's about 50 years old in the film, and sort of the things that she's going through to continue to protect her interests and to protect her family's legacy in these agave fields in this factory. But it's a fictional film, so she's playing herself, and her various employees and friends are playing themselves, but there's definitely a narrative. You come pretty quickly to the fact that you're not seeing something real. You're seeing this story that's been written for these characters. It's beautiful, and you made me think of it because you mentioned sort of that vibe from This Is Not a Burial, and that Kubrickian thing that that's happening in There Will Be Blood, because there are scenes of like agave cones moving through the town conveyor belts and into ovens, and people like tending things with long, slow glacial plans and very like unsettling music. And I'm like, I feel like something horrible is going to happen, and I don't know why, because the film's language is suggesting that something horrible is going to happen in that Kubrick kind of way. So again, a beautiful film. I was really impressed with the just formally, it's an amazing film, but I'm still sort of parsing how I feel about the docufiction elements.
There were two countries that were really well represented at this year's True False. It would be Mexico and Russia. And Mija is a Disney Plus pickup about a naturalized US citizen who has undocumented Mexican parents. And she is a music manager, an entertainment manager, and throughout the pandemic really struggles to, one, make her own way and find work, to get her parents through the documentation process. And it's a really sort of crowd-pleasing, inspiring, maybe tipping into a little, pat on the backy type film. I'm thinking of the Knock Down the House, the Netflix documentary about Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez from a couple of years ago, things like that. And then another one I think we both saw was The Still Side, which is closer to the ecological portrait that you get sometimes at
I always like to see at least one movie like that at True False. Like I try to make a point to see the sort of non-narrative, just vibing with a place sort of documentary.
But it is a very dreamy film that is a portrait of some rundown theme parks, and it has a faux theme park announcement background and some digital trickery with what might be animals that may exist or not. And then some, I think we both agree on this, some sort of superfluous interjections from what I believe is the filmmakers on ecological issues that little obvious.
Also, I just don't feel like they added much. Like there's some stoner rambling about ecology and empire and their big thoughts about these, and it's like I'd rather just sort of set those aside. I didn't mind the PA announcements, which had a kind of weird.
Oh no, I loved that.
And I'm not clear on whether those were just flat out made up. Are they reconstructed? Did they somehow find these? I almost don't want to know. Like it's just they add a kind of uncanniness when you hear like these booming theme park announcements. Come have a Mai Tai at our cabana. While you're sort of moving through this horribly like abandoned theme park / zoo / water park space that's being reclaimed by the elements. I know that like there's some criticism of abandonment chic and how that's kind of sort of become a thing in the last 10 years.
Back to Russia, where are we headed? And it's similar to some of the films that we're talking about and being a non-narrative portraiture of a place and a time. And it's just set in the Moscow metro system and just follows few events throughout its very short runtime, but you really get a holistic idea of at least this filmmaker's point of view of Russia.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a clever conceit in that let's walk around and there's also some issues with like documentarian consent and so forth that this brings up, which I think is, I don't think it's necessarily problematic for the filmmaker, but it is sort of putting those concerns out there that he sort of, as I understand it, he sort of walked around the subway system in Moscow for a year filming anything that struck his eye as interesting. And he sort of assembled it into this collage. The seasons come and go, like there's not even a real sense of time other than some holiday stuff pops up around Christmas and New Year's in some places, but it's just sort of, it's emphasizing the extent to which the subway is itself sort of a transitional or liminal space, and that but it also in some ways contains the multitudes that are modern Russia. It created some question marks and some sort of quizzical moments for me.
See, that's where you needed to go see Mr. Landsbergis.
Yes, well, evidently.
You needed 4 hours of context for it, so that kind of fully aware. So
it reminded me a little bit of Brett Story's very excellent doc from a couple of years ago, the hottest August, and that it uses this limited space and time to kind of like encapsulate a moment in a society.
That's such a good parallel. That was such a great film from True False a few years ago. That did rather well, and it played locally, I think, at Webster, maybe.
I guess it ended up being on PBS. So I think it ended up on like their Independent Lens or something.
Well, so the last kind of film that we usually see is like the biodoc, right? I saw a PBS, it's either Independent Lens or POV, I don't know the difference, called After Sherman by filmmaker John Cesare Goff. And it is sort of a self-portrait of his family, but it's a portrait of race in America through the lens of land ownership in the South and the transition of, at least in the public consciousness, the ideas of North versus South and how racism exists in both and is very clearly pronounced in both. And it's a very discursive documentary that's well made. It rings a lot of very familiar bells, but there's also some just really great ideas happening in it that I would recommend it for. And especially his father is a great preacher, and he was the Rochester, New York head of the NAACP. And the church he preached at was the church that had the mass shooting a few years ago. And so it chronicles that tragedy as well. And it's just completely awful. But what you do get is a portrait of a family who's very resilient and very ingrained in their culture. And while it's not, A+ filmmaking, I think you should check it out whenever it does eventually arrive on PBS. Another one is Second Chance. I did not get to see it, but I think that's something a lot of people are going to be talking about. You saw it, didn't you, Andrew?
Yeah, I saw it on Thursday. It's Ramin Barani, who a lot of cinephiles will be familiar with his work. I haven't seen every film that he's done, but I want to say this is probably the most conventional, sort of straight. He's done a couple of documentary short subjects, I think, but I think this is maybe like the first time he's ever done a doc feature about in a more conventional biodoc sort of way. This is about Richard Davis, who was a salesman and an inventor who was pivotal in the sort of body armor industry in America, beginning, I believe, in 1969, 1970. And his company, Second Chance, became like one of the leaders in the American body armor or bulletproof vest industry. And so Barani's kind of profiling him as this sort of larger than life character, typical American entrepreneur, going out there with a great idea and making something of himself, but also sort of his strange right-wing attitudes and philosophies and some of the shady things that his company became associated with over time. It's not bad. I'm not 100%. I love Ramin Barani as a filmmaker. I'm not 100% convinced he was the right person to tell this particular story. So I don't mean we're going to end. I don't want to end on a down note here, but it didn't always exactly work for me. It was a little too credulous, if that's the right word. Yeah, a little too vague.
Yeah.
Barani just kind of sits there and lets Davis sort of talk. And
well, I think everyone's going to have an opportunity to weigh in on it. It was purchased by Showtime, and it'll be on their platform shortly. I don't know the exact date, but we got a sneak peek at True False. I was very happy to go to True False this year. My feet kind of hurt. My back kind of hurts. But that's film festival time, right?
I got to stay close to the festival, which I don't think has ever happened for me before. I haven't had good luck with lodging in the past. I got to stay like 10-minute walk from sort of the cluster of venues. So I had the first time the True False experience I've been going for, but it reminded me that I don't walk enough.
And next time I am going to not bring cute shoes, and I'm going to bring walking shoes. Well, I'm excited for everyone to see these films, and I'm excited for the 2023 edition. How about we go and take a spin on Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy now instead?
なんかそれもエロくないそう、わかった元気だった
俺がお前の何を聞くの
マジで言ってんのそれ俺のセックスとどっちが好き
先生は私がずっと先生を誘惑していたと気づいていますか
We've come to the lens portion of the podcast. This is where we highlight one underloved or underseen film, and the current miniseries is the films of 2021. This is the last in this miniseries before we head to our next one, and it is my pick. It is Ryusuke Hamaguchi's Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy. This is his other 2021 film, the other one being, of course, Drive My Car, the one that Academy members have gone bananas over, and that a lot of critics, including myself, have gone bananas over. And that is now streaming on HBO Max. That sounds so weird to say, but you can watch it from the comfort of your home. Although I'd say if it's playing near you on a big screen, go ahead and do that. But Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy is available to rent on all major platforms, and there's a beautiful Blu-ray edition from Film Movement available for purchase. This is going to be a spoiled discussion of this film, so I'd say if you have interest in seeing it, and you should definitely watch it. Pause this part, skip ahead to our next segment where we pick our Oscar winners, and then come back to this. It is a triptych of stories. Hamaguchi says he's inspired by Eric Rohmer, the French film critic turned director, and in particular, a film they made, Rendezvous in Paris, which is a triptych of stories set in Paris. These are all set in Hamaguchi's native Japan, and they are short stories about women and their kind of flailings in love. I kind of want to explode each segment of each chapter.
Just briefly, one thing that the director does that's, I think, is signaled to me strongly that we aren't seeing a bunch of hyperlink stories. We aren't seeing an interconnected drama. We're seeing three discrete stories, is that he actually puts a little post-credits segment at the end of each one. And there's a musical cue that recurs as sort of an interstitial between each segment. So it's clear that one segment is ending and another is beginning. I won't say that they happen in different universes or anything, but it's clear we're not going to there's not a grand revelation we're building to where we realize all these stories are connected. It's just three nice little discrete stories. But the first one sort of begins with two characters, a model named Miko and her friend or possibly professional colleague in some capacity, it's a little unclear, Tsugumi. And they're riding in a cab back from a shoot that they've been working on all day. And sort of Tsugumi sort of giving Miko the full download about the new guy that she's met. And then she's very excited about it. And she had an incredible first 15-hour first date with, where they just talked and hit it off so well. And we're kind of seeing that through Miko's eyes. Tsugumi, I think, is doing more talking. So what's interesting is initially, when I first saw the film, I initially thought, okay, Tsugumi's the main character because we're hearing about her experiences. But then the film kind of splits off a little bit, and Tsugumi is dropped off, and Miko decides to go to a different destination in the cab than she was originally heading. I guess she was going home. She decides on the spur of the moment to go somewhere else. And where she goes, we are spoiling, right?
Oh, please. It's making me so happy. Just even hearing you describe it, I'm like, oh, it's so delicious.
Presumably on the spur of the moment, Miko decides to go to her ex's place of work. He's an interior designer, is what I remember. A fancy, very sleek, fancy, iMac-filled architects are in designer's office. And that's where we get the twist for this first segment, which is that the ex of Segumi's new boyfriend is Meiko, unbeknownst to her. And Meiko kind of shows up, and there's a great tension, I think, in that first scene where she shows up and you realize your awareness of what's happening starts to creep together. And like there's a moment of real volatility where it's like, oh, is this going to go all Fatal Attraction on us? What's happening here? Because Meiko's behavior is a little like erratic, and you don't exactly know what her motive is in showing up to sort of harass or just kind of like wheedle her ex-boyfriend and maybe seduce or tempt him a little bit. It's her motives remain somewhat inscrutable, which I think is part of the allure, why that first segment feels kind of like volatile and dangerous initially, because we don't know what the heck's going to happen here.
That's one of Hamaguchi's sayings, is that you're sort of suspended in this dangerous area. And his films feel very calm. They're very neat on the surface. They're about beautiful people who live in beautiful places, but there's broiling depths underneath. But you always kind of feel this sense of danger that you're not really sure that you're clear on what's going on or what is about to happen, because especially in this first segment, he really primes you to expect hard left turns from him. But I think one of the things that's very important about this segment is it sets up that all three of these stories are about storytelling. And often what you're seeing on the screen is someone telling a story. So there are two images. There's one of the story that's happening, at the characters are speaking, and then there's the actual image that you're seeing in it. And there's an interesting tension between, the stories that are being told and the stories that we're actually seeing, especially in those kind of calm surfaces and in the melodrama, which I think lies in the stories that they're telling each other. So he's got some interest in how we construct narrative to inform people of our character, of other people's characters. But interestingly, he uses storytelling very differently in each of these. This one has a sort of suspense narrative effect, and it's fair to call it a plot twist, in that you're not in this first scene, which is a very extended car ride sequence where Gumi is describing this kind of new relationship that she's in. The first time you watch this film, you think that Meiko is just sitting there listening and kind of like probing and just asking questions a friend might ask. The second time you watch it, you watch her face realize that she is talking about her ex-boyfriend. So it has this effect of playing differently the second time. But the first time I watched this segment, I couldn't help but think in my head, am I a Gumi or a Meiko? But so I think that's an interesting question, because when you talk about Eric Romer, you're talking about romantic stories, but his moral tales, his proverbs, these cycles of films that are expressly about kind of romantic ethics and morality. And
he loves putting characters into sort of pressure situations.
Yeah, exactly.
Romer does, like crises or temptations or something is like a recurring thing.
You put yourself in the position of these people, and it's, as a later segment expressly states, it's difficult to judge them. How could you judge them when you need to actually sort of look at yourself first? And that's something that comes up in the second segment.
Yes, so it's essentially about a college student who is held back by his emotionless professor, and then convinces his female friend that he's like also having a relationship with, to try to get the professor to do something inappropriate while they will be recording him in secret, or she will be, an attempt to get him fired from his job.
Yeah, and it doesn't quite
It doesn't quite go as they hoped and expected it would go.
I saw this, it played Sliff, and saw this with an audience. And this segment is the segment that gets the big laugh in it. That is when Professor Sagawa, who it keeps his door open because he has had experiences in the past where his closed office door meant that someone could say anything they want to about him. So this is what they're trying to do. This is a part of their manipulation of him. Now the girlfriend goes in and she gives this interpretation of his award-winning novel and a very sexual chapter about, well, it's a very sexual chapter. I don't want to describe it here, but it is very explicit and erotic, and there's some tension in the room. And at one point she's reading it, she gets up and she closes the door. And then as she keeps reading, he's looking at her like, and you're thinking, wow, this is really, really working on him. And he looks like he is so primed, and he's going to fall into, I believe they call it the honey trap of her. And he actually bypasses her and slowly reopens the door that she's just closed. And
Nice bit of physical comedy there.
It is so good. And the speed, the lack of speed with which he does it is so beautiful. This one, to what Andrew was saying, each segment was written on its own. Hamaguchi has made quite a few shorts. Touching the Skin of Eeriness is kind of an incomplete feature, but he released it as a short. There's a great short called Heaven is Far Away, and that is kind of a bit of a precursor to the ghostliness of Asako 1 and 2, and then the big grief portrait of Drive My Car. So he wanted to make all of these as shorts, but has determined that Japan's film industry isn't really the place for that. So he decided that he would make them into an anthology of films and made them one at a time, one script at a time, edited one at a time. And one of them was actually made during the production of Drive My Car, after that production was shut down at the beginning of the pandemic. And then the film as a whole was put together as the pandemic continued, before Hamaguchi finished Drive My Car. So this is why we got kind of a pile-on of Hamaguchi. And I think one of the interesting things is that they're all very concerned with the same things. They're concerned about storytelling, romantic moralism. They're about modern Japan and the people of modern Japan, but their structures are different.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the third segment. That if there is one note in this movie that doesn't really work for me, it's the completely superfluous, like, sci-fi insert conceit of the third segment. Like, it doesn't even really substantively matter. That there's a couple places where they mention it, but it doesn't even really matter for the plot. I feel like you could write that third segment without that essentially trivial conceit entirely.
I think it still has the same effect even without it being in there. I mean, that's just my 2 cents, but that's what I took away.
The third segment, once again, it starts with a text scrawl of, oh, it's 2019 and there's a virus that's affected all computers. And what's happened is that a lot of information has been leaked, and that personal exchanges are available. It's sort of like the Sony hack, but on a larger scale. So the entire world has decided, well, let's move back to snail mail. And I would say that it's more of painting the background than anything, and thinking about the condition that these characters are living under now. They've gone through a complete shift that they're used to having a wide open world with access to everyone and everything. And now what they've done is gone back to a world that is, more closed in. So it's certainly having an effect on people who have opportunities to connect, but decide not to connect. And I think the lead character, Suko, she seems closeted. And she runs into someone who she thinks is her high school sweetheart. and there's kind of vagaries exchanged, and they seem to be familiar with each other. But as their conversation goes on, it's actually revealed that these two women do not know each other. They've just mistaken each other for someone else. And then they continue, they very sweetly, and I think very graciously, let each other use them as the other person, and some sort of therapeutic working through some past issues, and being able to address problems that are happening in their lives, and use me as that person. Tell me what you would say to that person if they were actually in front of you. So for me, the whole soft sci-fi premise is, it does justify itself in not only the very small details, but also in just kind of understanding the world in which these people are living.
It is, it's usually the case that in an anthology, some strong segments are stronger than other. I do think that that all these segments are pretty strong. Like there's no, what I think of as like a weak link, but it also is the rare case where I think in my estimation of the quality, that it's consistently building. I think 1 is good, but 2 is better, and 3 is best, which is a pretty great way to have an anthology proceed, because you don't want to end on the weakest chapter. That's always a terrible place to be.
I agree with that order. I know a lot of other critics find the 3rd segment trite or overly sweet, and I think that's insane.
There's a point where it becomes performative cynicism. I'm the most cynical bastard imaginable, and I love the 3rd segment.
Yeah, the 3rd segment to me is the best. Kayla, do you have a preference? Do you have a ranking of them?
I would rate 2, 3, 1.
2, 3, 1. So wait, 1 is your favorite one?
No, 1's my
least favorite. Okay. So what is it about 2 that you like the most?
I just like its humor and how absurd it is.
It is so absurd. The final kind of not twist. The final beat is that she is going to email the recording of her reading Sagawa's novel to him. She's going to email it to him so that he can have it, because while he didn't know that he was being recorded, once he finds out, he appreciates it. And then, of course, she says, "Are you going to use it?" It's a very odd sexual exchange that they're having about something that's very oddly sexual. And she accidentally emails it to someone else because her husband walks in and starts screaming the name S.A. Gawa instead of S.E. Gawa, which is a mail company. And she sends it to the wrong email address.
I started thinking on the second viewing way more about the title of the film and how each individual chapter incorporates these 2 separate. The Japanese translation is a little different. I think it's something more like chance and imagination or something. I think is a more literal.
Very kind of vague. I think we get that kind of cultural play on Wheel of Fortune, which means more to us.
Yeah, but I started thinking much more carefully about each segment, how those 2 ideas, the idea of fortune, which can be seen as like destiny, but also chance and coincidence, and then fantasy, which could be conceived as dreams, but it can also be like delusion and miscommunication and deception. But that second segment, I like, there's a certain, Kayla mentions the absurdity of it, and there is a kind of absurdity to the fact that it ends on kind of a down note. Like there's this wonderful moment of emotional and erotic exchange between these 2 characters that's very unexpected. Neither of them really expected it, and it seems very wholesome and like good, and then it just gets completely derailed by the stupidest possible error, which like there's so many things that had to happen. Like her husband had to walk in at exactly that moment saying that exact word. It's such a dumb,
repeating it so many times, right?
It's such a dumb way to resolve that plot. And I don't mean that as a criticism of the plot. I mean, it highlights just how ridiculous that situation was, that the whole thing just ends up going into a dumpster fire because of one stupid little innocent mistake that isn't even really related to the A plot, if you will, of that story.
Right, exactly. And then the way that it resolves is so sad, but the woman in the story has some sort of regained some agency in the end. I feel she's in a terrible position in that it appears that, yeah, she's lost her husband from the very public scandal that happens from her very dumb mistake. It turns out the guy she was sleeping with, the younger guy she was cheating on her husband with, ends up in a position of power and didn't even need to do the thing that he did because of it. It became inconsequential, but it became of the utmost importance in her life and took her down a different path. But then she's able to, I think, gain as much agency as possible from another chance encounter that she has with her former flame.
Yeah, it's interesting how that epilogue or coda to the second chapter sort of in its own way, even though it feels like a downbeat compared to the main story, it does kind of reaffirm some things, which is that the woman now, she says that she's ashamed. She says to the professor in confidence as they're sort of sitting here having this very emotionally intimate, it's sexual, but it's also very emotionally intimate, where they're confessing their sort of individual fears and anxieties and insecurities. And she says that she doesn't like that she's impulsive or unconventional, that she doesn't follow social norms, and that gives her sort of self-loathing or just she's keenly self-aware that this is a flaw of hers. And Sakawa convinces her that that is not a flaw, that is a good thing about her personality and her character. And at the end, very literal, very end of that segment, she sort of makes a split-second decision to kiss her old boyfriend, to kiss Sasaki, and then sort of give him her card, even though she wasn't going to, and then storms off the bus sort of impulsively. Which again, I think kind of reaffirms that in that moment, she's thinking about what Sagawa told her those years ago about how maybe listen to yourself if this is your nature, to be like this, to flout social conventions, to be a little impulsive and volatile.
And it's interesting because in that moment, he does the very Hamaguchi thing of having direct address, where characters are actually looking at other characters, but he jumps the 180 line, and it's adopted from Ozu.
Does he do that once? I seem to remember he did that once. There's one part in each segment where he does that.
Yes, it's two characters having exchanges, but because it's direct address, they're both challenging us in those moments too, because they're looking right in your eyes. And it's something that's adopted from Ozu. Ozu would do it, but to different ends. I think Hamaguchi has a kind of a more capitalized spelling of using the breaking the fourth wall than what Ozu was doing whenever he would do it. I don't know. I still want to talk about the storytelling and the different storytelling, the different ways people tell stories throughout these three segments. And then the second one, there's several stories told. One is a chapter from a book, which is a fantasy. And then other stories that are told about, how people are doing now after a flash forward, which is, again, kind of another fantasy. And then the stories that are exchanged between the two women in the final segment, which are both past recollections of people who they are not, so versions of kind of fantasies, and then actual fantasies of what they would do if they were each other's person, right? So he's using storytelling in so many different ways. And I think at the end of the day, this is something that really moves me about Hamaguchi's work. And in this one in particular, it's so pronounced because I think he's done this imposition where he's restricted himself to tell these quote unquote short stories about storytelling. So I think it becomes more pronounced here.
Yeah, and I think they do work great as short stories. You could subdivide this. I mean, I think there's a structure, and like I said, I feel like there's a really good sort of escalating rhythm for me personally in the quality. And there's things like the little musical motif that's used repeatedly. that sort of binds them all together and thematically. But you could also chop these up and they would be perfectly little self-contained short films, which I think speaks to the strength. It does work great. It doesn't feel disjointed as an anthology, but the individual chapters could be strong enough to support themselves as little short films. I think one thing that you'll be glad to hear is that I liked this movie more the second time I watched it.
Yay! No, me too. Me too. It did.
I mean, it wasn't a bad. I always ranked it. It was like 31 on my top 50 of 2021. So it wasn't I didn't receive it badly, but my admiration for it did increase the second time. And part of it is I paid a lot more attention to the details and also the dialogue. It's much better written maybe than I had given it credit for. There's some really beautiful lines in it that I'm jotting down individual lines, which is usually a good sign that the screenwriting is good as I'm watching it. The blocking, like the way he moves character around spaces is great. There's even things like with costuming. I noticed in the first chapter, like look at the way he dresses Tsugumi and Meiko, like initially when you see them in their cab ride. Tsugumi is dressed like more appropriately for her age. She's got longer hair. She's dressed sort of in a casual / professional outfit. But Meiko is dressed like a child. She's wearing this hoodie and this oversized jacket. She has this short sort of schoolgirl haircut. And so they keep emphasizing things like she gushes to Tsugumi that, oh, you're so mature. You're so much more mature than I am. Like they're doing their best through production design and small details to sort of emphasize Meiko's immaturity, which I think then comes out in how she sort of behaves a little childishly when she confronts Kazuaki. And then what's interesting is later when we haven't even mentioned sort of the final scene in segment 1, which is they have this meeting at a cafe where Meiko has like sort of a blue sky moment where she imagines how she could react to the three of them coming together and sort of all the secrets coming out and how she could turn it into this horrible drama. And then she reassesses, sets that daydream aside and behaves much more maturely. And in that scene where she ultimately makes the decision to be an more adult about how she's going to respond to this love triangle, she's wearing this long floral dress. She's dressed more matronly, for lack of a better word. She's wearing this very long floral dress with a high turtleneck. So I do think like there's all sorts of interesting things going on in terms of composition and production design that are underlining everything that Hamaguchi's doing. So I totally was much more impressed on a second viewing because I was able to pay attention to those things.
And it is a film that reveals a lot about itself the more you've seen it. I've seen it 3 times. And like I said, it keeps revealing more to me. Let me say my favorite sort of filmmaking moment is this scene that you're talking about. And she imagines that she confronts them, and through the confrontation, Gumi runs away, and then he follows her after. And then they're in front of the window in this restaurant, and you see the two of them run down the street, him after her. And then there's a very kind of short snap zoom into Meiko, and it sits on her for just a second. And then it pulls back out, and the two of them are back at the table.
Is that done in camera?
It's all done in camera. It's all done in camera, as if you can kind of see or in your head, see the actors running a circle back into the restaurant and calming down. I know I'd be sweating bullets if I have to do that. But that's the sort of care that he's in trying to build a kind of identification and empathy with the main character, as it turns out, of this story, who's experiencing this great kind of growth in miniature.
Yeah, I'm noticing like the blocking in set chapter 2 as Sagawa and Nao are moving around his office, and the way they position their bodies relative to one another is really fascinating. So, and
how you're always aware of the door and the desk and as far as Hamaguchi's writing and direction, maybe we shouldn't praise it so much in this segment. I might have more to say about it when we go through the Oscars and pick our winners here in our next segment. All right, we have come to pick the winners we've stolen an idea from our patron saints of film criticism, Mr. Siskel and Ebert. They used to pick their winners every year. So we are going to go through a few of the big Oscar categories for this year, talk about the nominees, and pick our winners. There is a bonus episode near you where we have knee-jerk first reactions about the Oscar nominations, but this is the winner for certain categories that we would pick if we voted for the Oscars. And I will remind everyone again that we have our Cinema St. Louis has our Oscar ballot contest. That is where you're trying to predict the winners. So do not listen to us here because we're picking our favorites. And we're going to start with the Oscar We're going to start with some supporting performances, and we will start with actress in a supporting role. And the nominees are Jessie Buckley in The Lost Daughter, Ariana DeBose in West Side Story, Judi Dench from Belfast, Kirsten Dunst, The Power of the Dog, and Anjanou Ellis from King Richard. And my pick is Ariana DeBose, West Side Story. I'm giving Anita from West Side Story another Oscar. She is the spark that lights that film, and she shades this character in new ways that I think is incredible, fascinating, and much deeper ways than even the great Rita Moreno did in her originating Oscar-winning version of this role. And Kayla, what's your pick?
The same exact one.
Yes, because it's the right pick.
Yep, as always.
Andrew, what's your vote?
It's a tough one for me because I've always loved Kirsten Dunst, but I think maybe I'm in the minority here in that I don't necessarily think the work she's doing in The Power of the Dog is the best she's ever done. So I'm gonna go with Jessie Buckley in The Lost Daughter, just because I think she's a great actress. Her name has been sort of rising the last few years. She has already had some amazing performances under her belt. And this one in particular, I feel like has it's like a high degree of difficulty. She's playing a flashback character. She's playing a younger version of the same character that is being played by Oscar winner Olivia Colman.
Right.
And she's playing a character who is generally sort of prickly and unsympathetic. And she just kills it, as Jessie Buckley is wont to do. If you've seen her in anything in the last few years, you know she's amazing. So I feel like it's a actress who is sort of on the rise and doing great work consistently. And they gave her a very difficult role and she killed it. So that's my pick.
All right, let's move on to actor in a supporting role. Nominees are Kieran Hines, Belfast, Troy Kotsur, Coda, Jesse Plemons, Power of the Dog, J.K. Simmons, Being the Ricardo. I did not mean to put a spin and laugh when I read J.K. Simmons. I'm sorry. And Cody Smith-McPhee, The Power of the Dog. Cody Smith-McPhee is my home run winner for this. From you thinking that he's one thing, and the way he carries his body, and as a closeted queer person, how he embodies that, I recognize that. I used to be that, so I understand it. But he's also a psychopath, and I guess that's arguable too. But
he's just a boy who loves his mother.
He just loves his mom. Just a Western Norman Bates.
Yeah.
Kayla, what's your pick?
The exact thing. You did all the work for me, so thank you.
And Andrew, what's your pick?
We're unanimous on this one. I agree.
Yeah.
I think he's the home run. Troy Kotsur actually won SAG, I think. So like he's getting a little steam, but I feel like if there's one acting category that is closest to being a lock, it's this one, and it is entirely justified.
Yeah.
It's a great performance. It's one of those amazing like Fight Club / Shutter Island style things that I want to rewatch multiple times to figure out everything he's doing.
Let's go to writing. Let's talk about the original screenplay category. Nominees are Belfast, Don't Look Up, King Richard, Licorice Pizza, and The Worst Person in the World. original screenplay, I think we talked about this, Kayla. Licorice Pizza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is that your pick too? Yeah. It's like I'm looking at this category, and for me, not only is it the best screenplay, but it's also like if you're metagaming, this is the single original screenplay win. It is the kind of idiosyncratic auteur filmmaker, a weirdo who we're never going to give an award otherwise win, and it's Licorice Pizza.
Yep.
Andrew?
I think I agree. I'm not a big a fan of Worst Person in the World as some people. It's a solid B- film for me. I think we mentioned this earlier on a previous episode. I do think the screenplay is very strong. It has some great lines in it, but I mean, I think Licorice Pizza is in a different category than all of these. It's just a great, you know, as much as people have consistently described that film as a sort of scruffy, loose, shaggy hangout film, there's so much going on in the between the lines, and the way that, you know, I totally believe when PTA says that he wrote this for Alana Haim, I totally believe it because you can read between the lines and see like every exchange that she and Gary have in the film. You can sort of see it on the page, and then you can see it being elevated to another level in the performances. It's just, I feel like it's real, like invisible movie craft happening there, which is great.
He is a writer who is pretty writerly, and I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. And when they are brought to fruition on screen, I think it's just so special. And you don't see that kind of writerliness with it, because they're
rare case where a guy is a great writer, but also like a guy who thinks in terms of cinema, who's a virtuosic filmmaker. So.
All right, well, let's talk about some adapted screenplays. Our nominees are Coda, Drive My Car, Dune, The Lost Daughter, and The Power of the Dog. Surprising no one, Josh picks Drive My Car.
Yeah,
Kayla?
surprising no one. I also have the same as you. So
You guys are like in lockstep.
Oh, yeah, that's so great. Well,
have either of you read the original? I guess it's originally a short story, isn't it?
It's a Haruki Murakami short story in his anthology, Men Without Women, and it's very different. The character feels very different. Whereas Drive My Car feels like an adaptation of Murakami as a whole, and kind of an answer to some criticisms of him. And Drive My Car itself is sort of about adaptation in many senses. So of course we have to give it an adapted screenplay. Right, Andrew, or nah?
I'm going to be a little bit of a dark horse here and go with Lost Daughter.
Oh, heck yeah. No, I think that's a good choice.
And so my caveat to this category is I have seen or read none of the original like materials behind any of these. I haven't even read Dune. So I'm coming at this from a place of, not a place of how good of an adaptation is this, just a function of how does it feel on the screen. And I really loved what Maggie Gyllenhaal did with Lost Daughter. It's a very difficult screenplay with a difficult character in a scenario that's kind of hard to convey. I'm sort of marvel about how she conveyed this scenario on the page and then converted it to this what ends up being actually a very cinematic film. So yeah, I'm going with that. Even though maybe my heart says Power of the Dog, I feel like I want to be the dark horse there and say Lost Daughter.
I like that, because if anything, that is a kind of a feat of adaptation. Is how do you balance the sort of novelistic, it's Elena Ferrante, novelistic novel that she has, and how do you balance the flashback with the kind of kind of ambiguous present, and how do these two things relate, and what do they reveal? Each one of these nominees are very interesting adaptations. You have one that's an adaptation of another film. You have one that's an adaptation of a short story by a great writer, a well-known writer. You've got one that is an old kind of cult Western book. And then you've got one of the great new writers in there too. And then you have something that has been infamously unadaptable.
Right.
So that
I feel like we have to throw Dune a bone, maybe just for being like, oh my God, he pulled it off.
Yeah.
Like,
I think maybe round two. I'm not as big a fan of Dune as I think I'm not sure how Kayla feels about it.
I guess I'm not as crazy about it, but for what it is, yeah, I mean, I had a good time. It was all right.
That's kind of how I feel too. Like, for what it is, I like it. It's fine.
it does. The one thing I will admit is it feels very much like the first half of a 5-hour movie. It does not feel like a standalone film.
Yeah. And even to the point where it doesn't feel like the Fellowship of the Ring either, which is the first of a 14-hour film or something like that, that has sort of an ending to it. This one definitely is just the first half of something. But
yeah.
All right, let's talk about some more performances. We're going to go to actress in a leading role. Our nominees are Jessica Chastain, The Eyes of Tammy Faye; Olivia Colman, The Lost Daughter; Penelope Cruz, Parallel Mothers; Nicole Kidman, Being the Ricardos; and Kristen Stewart in Spencer. My pick is Penelope Cruz. I think it's we've talked about this on a previous episode. It's her second best performance, and her first best performance is Voltaire, the other Pedro Almodovar film that she was nominated for. She's been in many of his films, but you
love this movie, right?
Yeah. It's one of my favorites amongst his films in the past decade, and she is really deserves co-authorship in it. That's really how great she is in it, and she's able to pull off something. And in talking about another performance in this, like Olivia Colman, in doing she does some very dastardly things, some things that are very hard to make her character sympathetic, and yet she is, and you feel for her every moment of this really great journey she goes through. Kayla, your pick is Nicole Kidman.
No. My pick is Kristen Stewart for Spencer.
Okay. All right.
She goes for broke and it pays off. So
she really does go for broke. Pablo Larraín has her doing so much in it. What about Puking Pearls?
Not my favorite, but I respect it. I respect the hustle.
Andrew, what's your pick?
I might be with Kayla on this one. I think for me, it's a toss-up between Olivia Colman and Kristen Stewart, and I think I'm just going to go with Stewart because I think she's overdue, and Colman already has one. What Colman does in Lost Daughter is wild. My eyes really just couldn't be torn away from her, but I feel like Kristen Stewart had maybe a higher difficulty level. Usually, I know the bias is that the Academy loves impersonations. They love historical characters. They love playing real people.
3 of them here.
Makeup and hair and everything.
Yeah.
So I almost went into Spencer predisposed to dislike it. I liked Stewart as an actress, but I wasn't sold on the concept of her as Princess Di. And for 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, whatever she's doing with her voice in that movie is just I wasn't feeling it. And then something happened, it clicked, I warmed up to it, and I'm like, I think this might be genius. I'm not I hated it for about 10 minutes, and now I think it might be genius. She's doing this thing where every line sounds like it's being strangled out of her. It's a demanding, it's like the Pablo Larraín version of The Revenant. It's a very physically demanding role. And I know the stereotype is that the Oscars over reward that, but I just feel like she's a great actress who's definitely due for something like this. And she turned around my opinion 180 degrees in like 10 minutes at the beginning of that movie. To me, that's like a great feat of performance when you can do that.
If I'm being really catty, I'm gonna say that you have Stockholm syndrome.
What?
I don't like her in this movie, and it's
okay.
I think it's exactly what you were saying. It's so mannered to the point where I don't know. You can kind of think of it as a sort of metatextual performance too, because there are parallels between this character and Kristen Stewart and the kind of tabloidiness of their lives. I don't know.
Let's say this. I don't begrudge you that opinion. Okay. I'm not going to say you're crazy for thinking that or that you're completely off base. I'm just saying whatever she's doing clicked for me, and I love it. So,
you know who's doing a bad impersonation? Jessica Chastain.
And I love her so much as an actress, but geez, what is she doing?
But she's doing everything is what she's doing. But I think there's a category filled with some other people doing everything, and it's actor, the leading role. Let's talk about Javier Bardem for Being the Ricardos, Benedict Cumberbatch, The Power of the Dog, Andrew Garfield, Tick, Tick, Boom, Will Smith, King Richard, and Denzel Washington, The Tragedy of Macbeth. Denzel is my choice. He, even though he's been in a Shakespeare adaptation before, but Kenneth Branagh, fellow nominee this year, he's tasked with playing Macbeth, and he's an older actor, and it's not something people, I think, would immediately think for him to do. But from second one, it works. And it's not just because of the gravitas that he has naturally. It's because that he understands what I think Joel Coen is up to in positioning Macbeth, the Macbeths, as older people and positioning them as a kind of parallel to people in power now who are entitled and have the weight of the world behind them and no longer care except about their own position in things. Kayla, who's your pick?
I had the same. He's just
Denzel.
real in that, so.
Yeah. It is real, and it is so. And Andrew, who's your pick?
We're unanimous again. I'm not 100% crazy about any performances in this category, but if I have to pick, it's got to be Denzel. It is him doing Shakespeare in a Denzel register, which initially you would think maybe would clash a little bit or wouldn't work that great, but oh my God, he makes it his own. And like you say, the way he and Cohen and everybody else involved turn it from the hungry young man play into the old man with the Grim Reaper on his shoulder play. He like turns it into Lear. I don't even know what he's doing there. It's great. Without ever stopping to be Denzel in a way, like he's still giving a very Denzel style performance, but it completely works. It's great.
And he has moments of comedy, very, very bleak comedy, but as is the Coen tradition.
And I can but there are moments of he's a very physical actor, so I believe how afraid Macduff is when he's facing him down. Yes. It just, you buy it with Denzel.
Speaking of buying it, let's see if we buy these directing nominees. Spoiler, I don't buy one of them. We're talking about Belfast, Kenneth Branagh, Drive My Car, Ryusuke Hamaguchi, Licorice Pizza, Paul Thomas Anderson, The Power of the Dog, Jane Campion, West Side Story, Steven Spielberg. I'm going to do something weird. I'm going with Steven Spielberg for West Side Story. Drive My Car is my #1 film of the year. It is the thing that I have a Drive My Car poster. You guys can't see it, but I've got a Drive My Car poster from a dear friend of all of ours. And but if I'm talking about kind of splitting the prize and thinking about what you're awarding someone when you're awarding them a directing prize, the way Spielberg justifies making another West Side Story
from second one. It is a film that is very directed, and I heard someone call it neoclassical Hollywood. Sure, if we want to call it that. It's just damn fine directing, and to the point where it's actually his directing actually went viral on Twitter last weekend. He's such a master. He's such in control. But
I haven't seen the film yet. It just came on Disney Plus today, so it's going to be like one of my weekend plans. But I did see somebody on Twitter who said made a good case for like West Side Story as Spielberg as Hollywood mover and shaker. Like it is as much a testament to him as in his ability to shepherd a passion project from beginning to end and realize something that honestly, I'm like, everybody's reaction was sort of like, why do this? Why remake West Side Story? And him having a long-standing passion and then realizing it so successfully is kind of like a Hollywood version of an auteurist achievement, if that makes sense.
it makes absolute sense. And it's one of the reasons that I'm kind of splitting the difference and giving directing to Steven Spielberg for West Side Story. I'm wondering if Kayla's going to do the same thing.
Yeah, she is.
She is.
I am manifesting a Spielberg sweep, so
Oh,
Very good.
I would like-
Nice.
would this be his third?
How could I forget about Schindler's List?
That's where I
Schindler's
was.
List is the first, and then he won for Saving Private Ryan, and then that year Shakespeare in Love won picture split. So
Okay.
yes, it would be his third. And yeah, Andrew.
I'm going with Jane. It's got to be Jane Campion for me. I made no secret that of these films, Power of the Dog is probably my favorite.
Yeah.
And I feel like she, some of this is a little bit of, is she owed it, quote unquote? Is this a like one of our now sort of elder stateswoman directors who absolutely should have been recognized by now? Yes. But I also think the film is just, for me, just that good. I loved the way that I think David Ehrlich at IndieWire described it. It's like Jane has been out in the barn sharpening a blade since Bright Star, waiting for her moment, and she's seizing it. And that's like everything about Power of the Dog feels like a film that's been sharpened against a whetstone for days, if not weeks. It's a very sharp film in every sense of the word, and it's all her. It's her command as an auteur that's really bringing that film out, I think. So not to diminish anything, not to diminish the original novel or the cinematography or the performances, but I feel like it feels like, I initially didn't think it felt like a Campion film for like the first 30 minutes. And then it turns into, I'm like, okay, this is the woman who made In the Cut. Okay.
Yeah. That's when our sexual obsessions come to the top, right? Yeah. It is a very Jane Campion film. I would not be mad if anyone won in this category, except for Mr. Kenneth Branagh, who's
I still haven't seen Belfast.
You're fine. You don't need to.
Well, it's his memory. It's his memory film, right? Like it's his
Yeah.
semi-autobiographical film.
Yeah. It is a very sweet movie. I don't think you can really say that there's anything wrong with it other than its kind of innocuousness. All right, here's the big one. Again, I'm pretty sure we've all just revealed ours, so there's zero suspense in this Best Picture, but let's go through. The nominees are Belfast, Coda, Don't Look Up, Drive My Car, Dune, King Richard, Licorice Pizza, Nightmare Alley, The Power of the Dog, and West Side Story. And my pick is Drive My Car. Kayla, what's your pick?
I think you know what my pick is.
Is it Licorice Pizza?
It is Licorice Pizza.
Our number one films of the year. I think probably like all-timers for both of us, right?
Yeah.
We both got our films. We did not get our films nominated, but they got nominated, which never happens. We talk about it on the Oscar nomination bonus episode, but I think we were all saying it was probably like No Country for Old Men, like 2007 was probably the last time something like that happened.
That's the one that springs to mind. The last time I totally agree.
And Andrew, what's your pick?
No surprise, I'm going with The Power of the Dog. Of the films on this list, it is the highest one in my estimation. I think it was number 3 on my best of 2021 list. It's just a film I kind of can't wait to revisit it again. It's a film that really rewards multiple viewings. I feel like it's sort of, again, it feels like a movie that Jane Campion has been out there waiting to make, planning, making a scheme behind the scenes invisibly, if you will. And there's a weird metatextual thing going on there.
Making a rope out of rawhide.
She's been out there braiding a rawhide rope. And it's a beautiful film. I think there's a tendency maybe to oversell the sort of twisty or thriller aspects of it, and when you can sell it as a just beautiful, majestic, sensitive Western on its own terms, even apart from sort of the thriller twisty aspects of it. I love it. Can't wait to revisit it again, which I think is the best kind of best picture, right? You just want to go back to it over and over again.
I think at this point, certainly...
I wouldn't be, can I say though, I would not be sad with a drive-by car is like my runner-up. I wouldn't, if that pulls off some kind of bizarre dark horse win, I wouldn't be disappointed. It'd be awesome.
You won't be able to get a hold of me for a few days if that happens. I will be crying or very drunk. I'll be on a lost weekend. Yes, I will not be upset either. And I should say Licorice Pizza was in my top 5. Power of the Dog, West Side Story. Yeah, that's it. We're like in my top 20, and I think Kayla, you had those in your top 22. So it, overall, a pretty good year. I think there's one really rancid stinker in this bunch, a few kind of soft lobs down the middle, and then like great movies. So
2021 was a great year. I feel like 2020 was maybe a little mushier.
It was soft.
But 2021, we really started to build up steam. I think around the summer, I was like, my God, my best of list is like 50 movies deep already, like halfway through the year. It was crazy.
Yeah, it really was. And what a great way for us to get out of this mini-series. And our next one is going to be timed with Cinema St. Louis's Micro Festival, Q-Fest St. Louis. We're going to do Queer 90s. And our first one is going to be Andrew's pick. That's Gregg Araki's The Living End, which is available to stream on, Andrew, what was it?
I believe it is on Canopy and Criterion for streaming, but you can also pretty much rent it anywhere for $3 or $4. So widely available, fortunately, right now.
Perfect.
Probably one of the reasons I picked it. But I love Araki, and I'm eager to sort of revisit one of his earlier films.
It's going to be a good bad time for sure. So let's close things out and let's get one more thing from everyone. Before we go, we close out every episode with one more thing. We've got more recommendations to make, and we're all going to drop our socials so you can get even more than that. I will go first. I'm Joshua Ray. You can find me on Letterboxd, Instagram, and Twitter at Crispy Retinas, where I may or may not have been very late to the party and watched all of Euphoria in the past week. I feel like I've really gone through something. I started the show to understand what y'all are putting in my timeline. And as it turns out, I was riveted and obsessed. Texting Kayla saying, have you watched Euphoria? And of course she had. And I have been keeping up, like everyone else in the world, or like the young person that she is. I am a 35-year-old man. I am recommending Euphoria. It goes beyond being a teenage soap opera, and I think it has some really lovely filmmaking, among the best that you can see on television right now. It certainly has its points where it might go into let's create some memeable moments and ignore some great writing. But for all of that, it is such an incredible show. And I've just seen earlier today that it is now HBO's second most watched show after Game of Thrones. So I'm really wasting a recommendation telling you to watch it when you already have. But Euphoria is my one more thing this week. Kayla, how about you?
I also have a TV show. I don't know if it's necessarily the same like level as Euphoria, but it is Love is Blind. So I watched, all of that, as I'm sure the rest of the world also watched as well. And yeah, it was wild. It was crazy. It was fun. It was a good time. So yeah, that I don't know if I'd
For those of us who
recommend.
don't know it, what is it? Like,
Okay,
what's the
so it's
premise?
basically like these people, these groups of people, they meet, or they fall in love without ever meeting each other. So they go into these pods and they have conversations over like the span of, I think, like almost 2 weeks. And so they just talk to each other through like a wall. And then at the
Okay.
end, they can, like, if they truly form a connection with them, they can propose. And then, so that's like half of it. And then the other half is just them coming out of the pods and meeting for the first time and seeing if they can like actually continue on like a relationship without, just now that they met each other and like seeing what they look like. And they just keep asking, is love truly blind?
Wow. This is on Netflix, right?
Yeah, it's on Netflix. It's on its second season. So I just watched the second season. And
Wow.
there's also a Love is Blind Japan and Brazil. So I'm
Oh my
excited
gosh.
to watch those.
So my only question is, has there been, with all these reality shows, I have to always like imagine the most dire scenario. Has there been the moment when like the doors come up and one of the two people just like runs away screaming? Like,
Not necessarily. I mean, I think they try to like fake it as much as possible, but that happens like after the fact, like after that initial meeting, then they're like, oh my God, what did I like rope myself into? So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's
two seasons now.
Yep. Yeah.
The first season had a follow-up episode from
Yes.
because there was a big break during the pandemic, or
Yep.
we're still in a pandemic during lockdown, and they did a follow-up episode to each of the couples to see where they were.
Oh.
And there's like one couple that seems like they're very genuinely like happy, or at least working together.
Cameron,
Yeah.
And also I will say that basically at the end they have to have a wedding, so that they pretty much have to choose if they want to spend the rest of their life with that person, and they only have I think like a month or like a few weeks to like do all of that. So
It's so good. It's so good. All right, Kayla, where can people find you online?
you can find me on Letterboxd. It's just my name, Kayla McCullough, and yeah.
Good. Andrew?
So Black History Month just ended, so I'm a little late to the game on this one in recommending this, but I do want to recommend another HBO thing, which is a new special. I guess I don't know if it's 60 minutes, a feature film. I guess it's just sort of an hour-long special. On HBO, available on HBO Max right now, called Frederick Douglass in 5 Speeches. I guess you could call it a documentary, but it's almost a kind of performance piece. So director Julie Marchesi pulled together some of the great sort of American Black performers and had them do spoken word performances of some of the most famous speeches made by Frederick Douglass. And the whole thing's kind of stitched together with readings from his biography. So it's 5 performers: Denzel Whitaker, Jonathan Majors, Nicole Beharie, Coleman Domingo, and Jeffrey Wright. So all sort of heavy hitters doing Frederick Douglass speeches. And then Andre Holland does readings from his biography as kind of a framing device. Incredible. And it reminded me a lot of Raoul Peck's documentary about James Baldwin,
Mhm.
I Am Not Your Negro, and that like sometimes the best thing you can do with somebody who's a great sort of public intellectual or wordsmith is just let their words speak for themselves. It's not as successful as Peck's film because the director can't resist putting other talking heads in there. Like Henry Louis Gates has to show up and explain, and other historians have to kind of show up and explain what the context is and give us the biographical background on Douglass's life. But it's really just awesome to see great performers performing, maybe is the right word, I guess. Performing Douglass's words is just awesome to see. If you aren't stirred by watching Jonathan Majors sort of work himself up into a firebrand crescendo while spitting Frederick Douglass speeches, I don't know what to do for you. That's just awesome to watch.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. Coleman Domingo, I think, is one of my favorite just people, period, right now. I did not know that he is in Euphoria, and he is so special in it. So I will watch that. You start watching Euphoria, Andrew.
Really, I have problems with Sam Levinson.
You will have many more after watching this.
I am not a friend of Sam Levinson. So.
But yes, and then
so that's the only reason I haven't watched. Honestly, like I love Zendaya. Like the subject matter looks awesome, the style looks awesome. But then I see like, no, I saw Assassination Nation. I know, not today, Satan. I am not watching this show.
He's gonna get you again. You're gonna get wrapped into it. I know, just like I did. And where can people find you online?
I'm on Letterboxd at AWyatt76 and on Twitter at Arachnophiliac.
Very good. And you can find all of us at cinemastlouis.org, over at The Lens, where we do new reviews, some retrospective pieces, other features. Follow us at STL Film Fest on Twitter and Instagram, and we are Cinema St. Louis on Facebook. We will be back in a couple of weeks to talk about Gregg Araki's The Living End, the first Andrew's Choice in our Queer 90s series. We will see you then, and good night and good luck.